Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I'm here to talk about Jake Matthews versus Darrius Flowers, who is taking this fight on short notice, replacing Miguel Baeza. Flowers and Matthews are both 28 years old. Flowers is 12-5 as a pro, and he's giving up 2 inches of height and 1 inch of reach to 18-6 Matthews. Matthews, he's been around the UFC at this point, it feels like forever, probably coming up on 10 years. We know who he is as a fighter. Very versatile guy. Got a lot more finishes in the UFC via submission earlier on, but here, you know, he's climbed the ranks, so it's been more difficult to dominate his opponents, I guess. And he's really come into his own as a striker. That performance against Andre Fialho was a pivotal performance for him. He gained a lot of respect and caught everybody's attention. And then things kind of got away from him in that Matt Semmelsberger fight. Semmelsberger beat him up on the feet, dropping him multiple times. And even though Jake was beaten up in that fight and hurt very badly a few times, he still hung in there and he made it the distance. So that overall bodes well for his chin, which I think is the only thing he'd have to worry about here against Darrius Flowers, to be honest. I mean, he could be ripped to the mat. Flowers is a decent wrestler, but especially with short notice and all that, I think the only way he loses his fight is by his chin failing him. And it hasn't happened yet, even though he was knocked down multiple times. He's still going strong. His one TKO loss comes to Kevin Lee, and that was from the back mount. That's a jiu-jitsu loss. Speaking of which, he's got 3 submission losses, and they're to very good fighters in the UFC. Sean Brady and Rocco Martin, formerly Anthony Rocco Martin, the artist known as Rocco Martin. They got him out of there in round 3, and James Vick guillotined him in round 1. He also lost twice by decision, once to Semmelsberger and once to Andrew Holbrook in a close enough fight. But Jake, that's primarily where he's been beaten, is on the ground. You know, that's his primary weakness here, and pretty much by submission. And Darrius Flowers, that's not really in his, you know, skill set. At least it hasn't hit the surface yet. He's got a 12-5 record. He's got 8 TKO victories, just 1 submission and 3 decisions. And the submission, I don't think I saw, but I'm pretty sure it was submission due to strikes or something. I don't know if it's an actual submission move. But where he gets his work done is with his violence. Guy's a violent son of a bitch. Really good, powerful striking, and decent wrestling as well. You know, we saw him get his last win via slam or pile driver against Amiran Gogoladze in the Contender Series. That's how he got into the UFC here. But, yeah, Darrius Flowers, I think he's got a good chance early in round 1 if he really applies himself here. But that's pretty much it. And even there, I don't think it's such a good chance, to be honest, because Jake Matthews, again, his chin has never really failed him. It started to in his last fight, but he hasn't gone down yet, and he's 28 years old, probably entering his prime. I think Darrius Flowers is vulnerable on the ground. He's got 5 losses. 4 of them come via submission, just 1 via TKO. And the TKO was to Bobby Volker, former UFC fighter. Robbie Lawler knocked him out with a head kick. And he also lost to former UFC fighter Joe Vadepo. That guy Kimura'd him in round 1, or an Americana. Ryan Leninger was his last loss, guillotine in round 1. That guy doesn't have a name. You know, I think he's definitely vulnerable on the ground, Darrius Flowers. And despite, I'm sure, patching up a lot of holes along the way, he's 28 years old, you know, and he's entering his prime, but he's still been submitted somewhat recently to guys who, you know, if he's in the UFC, he shouldn't have been submitted to. So with that, and the fact that he's taking this on short notice, and the fact that Jake Matthews has never been knocked out, and at least has a good chin on paper, I think Jake Matthews gets past a dicey round 1 and then takes over this fight. And even though I think Jake would, I could totally see Jake winning via decision, I'll probably throw a sprinkle or 2 on him getting a finish down the stretch, rounds 2 and 3. And I'm more inclined to say submission, especially because of the way Darrius Flowers has lost, and Jake Matthews has more submissions than TKOs. But if the odds present themselves in a certain way where flat odds are close to submission, I'll probably just play the flat odds. But I do think Jake takes over this fight. up at high altitude against a guy with short notice, and Jake being a very well-rounded guy, I think he takes over and finds a finish down the stretch. Figures out how to do it and gets it done. That's the pick. Jake Matthews, round 3. Fuck it. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.